What's up, Shred Sexies? Welcome back, Death of the Fingers. So the next most obvious question based off the last video is going to be, how do you come up with these custom practice sessions? So I came up with this one, obviously. There's another variation of it at the end of the video, so check it out if you feel like it. But the key here is not only just combining these elements and learning how to do that, how to apply basically theoretical knowledge and fretboard knowledge and systems knowledge all together simultaneously to be able to come up with an exercise like this, so then you can start practicing like this on a regular basis instead of being like, show me exactly step for step what you just did. Rather, you sort of be like, okay, I understand what they're doing there. I get the broad strokes. Now I just have to figure out how I'm going to do it. And that's where the big takeaway comes in, is always practicing musically. You are what you eat. You are what you play. So if you always practice in sort of like a sterile environment, it's going to come out sounding sort of unidimensional. So it's really important for you to inject some life into it, not just the note selection, not just changing it up as far as the techniques are concerned, but also the idea that, you know, you're sort of like injecting the human element into it. And you're not just speeding through it like it's a metronome type exercise. And that's really important right there. So, you know, you'll notice from the exercises and all the rest of that stuff, I try to be musical. I still stay on time as much as I can, but I try to be musical about it without actually sacrificing the human element. So when you're practicing music, practice musically. And then only once in a while, when you're like, okay, I need to really hunker down on this one particular thing, then really super laser focus in and on the technique and stuff. But outside of that, it's about note selection. It's about fretboard knowledge. It's about combining these ideas, right? The fluency and the fluidity of combining ideas and systems. Once you get good at that, you have an endless source of ideas that'll come gushing out, and you can just keep doing this stuff over and over and over again. Of course, you become an amazing musician, not just a great guitar player, not just full of an encyclopedia full of, you know, rehashed licks or solo ideas. You can actually genuinely create something on your own. And of course, that's the gold standard and what we're always looking for. So no more yip-yapping in the intro. Let's get into this lesson. Okay, step one has to be choosing a key. Of course, we're going to use the key of G major. You're seeing this chart here. You need to know every piece of information on here and what that actually means with respect to all the other pieces of information. What does the step pattern mean? What does the scale degree mean? What does these modal names mean? You have to know all of that. So that's a lot of work right there. But of course, once you get that far along, then what we can do is start to combine it with various elements like 3 notes per string, how to express this collection of notes. We can use 3 notes per string as a major mode, as a harmonic minor mode, as the melodic minor mode, right? We can use arpeggio sequences, cadences. We can use motifs, call and answer, if you will. You can use tension and release. So there's this huge sort of array of information that you can draw from with respect to combining these elements, right, with this basic information. And that's really sort of the nexus, the wellspring, if you will, from which all of your musical inspiration flows. So you need to know these things, these systems, and the major scale, or whatever scale you prefer to work in, information like the back of your hand. Okay, so that's that. Let's get into the 3 octaves principle. Okay, so I've selected sort of the idea of doing triad arpeggios and using the 3 octaves principle from all the elements to be the sort of bedrock of the idea that I want to actually build. Okay, so of all that stuff, I was like, I was going to use these 2 elements to be the most predominant. In this case, triad arpeggios using 2 strings and, of course, 3 octaves principle. So obviously, 3 octaves principle is just playing the same note in 3 positions moving up the neck, which means I can use the same sequence of notes at each 3 positions, and that becomes incredibly useful. So you're going to see me basically demonstrate the entire scale, the G major scale, using the principle of 3 octaves, and you have to be able to do the same thing because each one of these steps can be now used to sort of build an arpeggio sequence or a scale fragment or whatever it is that you want, a chord, to sort of improvise with. So that's why you have to know each one of these positions relative to the other. So give the exercise a shot. All right, now that we've pieced together the 3 octaves theory and each of the scale degrees in G major, now, of course, I can start using each one of those positions to build the appropriate triad arpeggio. So based off the first degree, it's going to be major. You'll see me go up major. Obviously, the second and third degree are going to be minor. Fourth degree is major. And at the very end, you can see me use this G major 7 inversion. I'm going to explain it later on in the video, so don't get too stressed out. You're going to see me use it a lot, but you can see the power here, basically starting off with triads and then going to this more exotic arpeggio, in this case, the major 7 with the add 9. And you can really, you can really take it to the next level kind of situation and tie up your idea very easily. So, if you're just getting into the 3 octaves theory, this is a great way to start practicing creatively with it by going up and down and then just going up in other places. And of course, starting to mix and match. If you can't do these more exotic arpeggios, do a scale. There's nothing stopping you. Let's get into it. All right, so in this section here, after we've established the 3 octave principle and we've layered the sort of G major triad over top of it in the first degree here, because we're working in G major, of course, what we want to do is evolve that triad up to a dominant 7, in this case, the major 7. And once we do that, now we can start manipulating that step pattern, if you will, to get all the other variants, right? Major 7 will transform into dominant 7 by lowering the 7th degree. Then that will be transformed into a minor 7 when I lower the 3rd degree, right? And then the minor 7 transforms into a minor 7 flat 5, which is diminished flavor, right? And then I can take the diminished and make it even more diminished by lowering the 7th degree again, double flattening it, so I get the diminished 7th. So that process right there, and what it sounds like, more importantly, is incredibly important to your training regime. So do not skip over this. So you'll see me do it in the Ionian position across 3 strings, but then you'll see me do it in the Aeolian position using the exact same chord sequence, G major 7 to G7 to G minor 7 to G minor 7 flat 5 to G diminished 7th in the Aeolian position. So bada bing, bada boom, right? They're the exact same sequence, but I'm doing completely different ideas. And of course, I present them differently too. One, I just do them one after another. So you're like, okay, well, that's what that sounds like. But then I use a sequence to be like, okay, I'm starting to get it a little bit more now. When I do the sequence, I'm starting to hear how each one of these things move. So again, it's a great little training platform for you to get fully aware that you cannot skip over this part. You have to learn this sequence of notes and the morphing of these chords, these arpeggios, if you will, if you truly want to get to the highest levels of musicianship. So let's get on it. All right, now that we figured out essentially that there's this natural decaying process with respect to stable chords moving to diminished type chords, okay? So the major 7 decays down to the dominant 7, the dominant 7 decays down to the minor 7, the minor 7 decays down to the minor 7 flat 5, and of course that's going to decay down to the diminished 7th. I can use that information now to arrange a bunch of chords in a sequence, if you will, and they'll all sound really killer together, right? So instead of doing a 2-5-1 or a 1-4-5, I'm now using this principle, moving from major 7 to dominant 7, and then after dominant 7, I'm going to play a minor 7, and then after the minor 7, I'm going to play a minor 7 flat 5, and in the case of the exercise, instead of doing The diminished seventh, I actually switch over to the harmonic minor scale, which I'm just substituting in for the same flavor, if you will, as the diminished arpeggio. So there, that is mystery revealed. So essentially, in this example, what you're going to hear is me start off in the Aeolian position with the major seven, and then show you from the 2-string configuration where it comes from with respect to the 6-string configuration. So the one at Aeolian actually comes from the Locrian position, 3rd inversion, major 7, right? So, and you're going to see me do that. The next one obviously is going to be down as a 1st inversion in the Locrian position for dominant 7. Then I'm going to jump into a 1st inversion minor 7 from the Ionian position. Again, notice it goes from major 7 to dominant 7 to minor 7. Of course, I'm going to do minor 7 flat 5, jumping up from Dorian, right? And then, of course, I'm into the harmonic minor now, which I already established was going to be substituted in for the fully diminished sound. So this is really important. And in the second one, of course, you're going to hear me just basically play it with the extension note. Okay, so I'm going to take the original idea where there is no extension note and then add in the extension note so that you can actually practice it like that on your own. Drawn from 3 notes per string. You don't need tabs. You need to know 3 notes per string, and you need to know how to create these arpeggios. Put those 2 pieces of information together. Now you have an incredibly powerful tool. It's like the Herodric cube from Diablo. Get on it. Let's do it. All right, this is a hybridized sort of like harmonic minor sequence. You can see it here. The coolest thing about it was I snuck in this little section here of the melodic minor, which I felt smoothed it out. It took a little bit of the bite of the harmonic minor out, and it gave me another opportunity to sneak this in. But you're like, where do those notes come from? Those 3 there, they don't look normal. And they're not. They're from the melodic minor. So that's me combining the harmonic minor and the melodic minor together, but just in a very, very, very tiny little smattering, which makes it sound that much cooler, right? So, of course, I'm just using this as a template, so I'm kind of moving around. It's not always just meant to be played as a scale up and down, right? So you can use it to sort of go up and down in little micro increments, if you will. So make sure you practice that on a regular basis, but again, substitute it in for the diminished flavor at the end of the arpeggio sequence. Nails it. Let's check out the example. All right, here we are at the arpeggio sequence. No big deal. Basically, a lot of diminished and minor 7 stuff. And the second sort of improv I do it based around the diatonic scale sequence. In this one, I do it much more based around the idea of synergy and cadences. So there's two different mindsets there, and you can hear the difference in results, if you will. Now listen, the big takeaway is you have to come up with these sequences on your own. I'm still using the diatonic sequence, right? I'm using the 6th degree. I'm using the sharp 5. I jump down to the Lydian position. I jump down to Phrygian. I'm still using G major. I'm just using superimposition by layering other arpeggio shapes over top of them. And it creates the cadence, if you will, and the sequence that makes it sound so sick and sweet. So I'm not necessarily changing the underlying information, just what I'm actually playing in that position. I know that at Phrygian I can play diminished. I know at Dorian I can play diminished, and I do. So that's why it comes across as unexpected, and you're like, oh yeah, that's really neat. And that lets me basically create a jumping off point so I can jump out of the key, which allows me to go to E major, right? So I modulate from G major into E major, the relative minor, flip it over to a major. Done deal. It's got a really killer sort of cadency type sound, right? So again, me using some music principles there to keep it fresh, new, and interesting. So that right there pretty much wraps it up. I mean, you don't have to go crazy. The thing is practice musically. Sort of come up with these exercises based around the things that you can do on the fretboard. And of course, break it down. I went from the 3 octaves principle to layering triad arpeggios over top of it, to evolving those triad arpeggios up to the dominant 7 variants, to then now manipulating those major 7 sort of dominant 7 chords to get all the other ones, right? Dominant 7, minor 7 flat 5, and fully diminished. And then I deconstructed that set of arpeggios, and I was like, well, I can start up here at the Aeolian position and play major 7, and that puts me down here at Locrian. I can now ascend using dominant 7, the next one in the sequence, and that'll let me get to minor 7 in the Ionian position, and so on and so forth, right? So you see me start to take all this information, break it apart, and then rearrange it, if you will, to come up with a dynamic practice session. And finally, last but not least, you have to start to take the same information. You'll hear in the second solo that I use kind of a lot of the same ideas. It's not played the same, but they're the same positions. I don't actually change too much. I just change how I actually approach it and how I play it until I get to the arpeggio sequence where I'm changing over now to play minor. And I can't remember. I think it's just a whole bunch of minor 7 sequences. But there it is, right? And that's the thing is like you can recycle this information. It's not just the one. It's just a template. And of course, you can then start to use that to really, you know, break down the fretboard and get creative. So I hope this lesson helped. I appreciate every single one of you. Just put your head down, work on this material, start absorbing it slowly, one step at a time. Your feet are on the path now. It's up to you to seize the moment and work towards a collective goal, if you will, where you're like, I want to master all of this basic information so I can start chaining them together like that to come up with these dynamic practice exercises, which will supercharge your practice sessions and turn you into a real badass musician that almost any band would be like, we want him. Right. We'll see you in the next one.